Friends, I am Deepak Kannan from Faculty of Finance, Baroda, and we are meeting again for the 30th module in Aesthetics and Philosophy for the PG course in Visual Arts. Today, we are going to discuss a scholar who again changed the concerns of Western aesthetics. If you remember our sessions in the history of aesthetics, I said that in 19th and 20th century, there are so many scholars who changed the course of Western aesthetics. They changed the concerns of Western aesthetics. The first one of them was Immanuel Kant, who gave a Copernican turn to the study of Western aesthetics. Now here is another scholar, Sigmund Freud, who again changed the course of Western aesthetic thought. Now what he is trying to inquire into is not an aesthetic theory. Rather, you can say that he is trying to understand the creative process of mankind, because he is basically a psychologist or a psychoanalyst. Psychoanalysis is not a new discipline. We know that this discipline started much before Sigmund Freud. But Sigmund Freud is considered to be a very important figure in the study of psychoanalysis because he mainly talked about the subconscious mind. Now, subconscious mind too has been talked about by some scholars much before Sigmund Freud. Like Schopenhauer talked about subconscious mind, Nietzsche talked about subconscious mind. And even after Sigmund Freud, there are quite a few scholars like Adler or Carl Jung who again talked about subconscious mind. But what Freud tried to pose in the study of subconscious mind is very, very interesting, because he is almost trying to tell us that whatever we create or whatever we behave, all our behavior, all our creation, all our actions are not necessarily intentional. Which means that our behavior is not governed by our intellect. Our behavior is not governed by our conscious mind. There is something else which we do not know. It is almost a figure of otherness. There is something else which we do not know, whom we do not know, who is controlling our behavior, which was a very different thought. And obviously it was not very easily accepted by people. So let us try to understand it, and we'll try to understand it in the context of art, because Freud has written so many other things. It will not be possible for us to discuss all of them. We are only going to focus on that part of his analysis which is concerned with art. Now Freud, who was born in 1856 and worked towards the end of 19th century, he proposed a kind of model of human mind. Now we know that the human mind is a notional thing. Human mind does not exist. We do not know where exactly does it exist in the human body, or perhaps it doesn't exist at all. But he is talking about visualizing the human mind, and to study that human mind, you will have to start your inquiry from the human behavior. Since the human mind doesn't exist, we will have to start our inquiry with something more tangible, which is something more empirical. So he starts his inquiry with human behavior. In this case, we can start talking about the human art, the human creation. Human mind, in a way, is a notional object. We do not know where exactly the human mind exists in the human body, or whether it exists or not. But Freud proposes a model of human mind, and to study that, he starts his inquiry from human behavior. Human mind is abstract. Human behavior is tangible, it is empirical. Naturally, this will be a backward study, starting from behavior and going back to the intention, going back to the desire, going back to the volition. Because every action has an intention behind it. Every action has a volition behind it. Every action has a desire behind it. But according to Freud, every action is not intentional, because many of these desires and volitions are not known to us. They are not known to the conscious mind. And we will have to search for the origin of those desires in the unconscious mind. So when he is proposing the model of human mind, he is proposing it in three layers. The layer which is known to us, the human mind is almost like an iceberg. A large portion of it is not known to us. Only a small tip of it can be understood by the onlooker. Which is understandable, the portion which is fathomable is the conscious mind. The conscious mind is known to us. You can also read the conscious mind of another person to some extent. The doctors and the psychologists do it. And a large portion it is the unconscious mind. Now, according to Freud, all the unwanted desires, all the memories, all those desires which are not approved by the society, which are not approved by yourself, all those desires are pushed into the subconscious, in the unconscious mind. And this unconscious mind is governed by an element which is called id. Now see, it is a three-storied house. The largest and the lowermost story is the unconscious mind, which is governed by the id. Now id is that power which is based on wild desires. According to Freud, every human being is also an animal. When a child is born, civilization is an artificial process. Human beings have discovered civilization. When we are born, we are not civilized. A child doesn't understand civilization. A child doesn't understand morals. The child doesn't understand ethics. It doesn't care for ethics. If a child wants something, it wants something. If you try to tell him that it doesn't belong to us, it belongs to somebody else, the child would insist that he wants it. He wants a balloon, and he would insist that he wants a balloon. If you try to convince him that it doesn't belong to him, the child cannot understand it, because for the child, the only true thing is the desire. But as the child grows up, after it crosses the age of 3, when it starts understanding the rules and regulations of the society, the notions like ethics and morals, then the child starts understanding that he should not ask for such things. There are so many things which he is not supposed to do, and then the behavior starts changing. But it doesn't mean that the child forgets all those desires. It doesn't mean that the child gives up all those desires. Those desires are pushed into the corner of the human mind where they keep alive. This is very important. And this process keeps happening all your life. As we grow up and as our behavior is governed by the rules and regulations of the society, as our behavior is governed by the morals and values which have been fed to us by the society, we know that some of these desires are not permissible. But it doesn't mean that we give up those desires. Those desires are forcibly into the dark corner of our unconscious mind. And the desires are living over there, governed by the id. Now this id also gives birth to the libidinal energy. Libidinal energy is the sexual energy. And according to Freud, this libidinal energy is responsible for any creation. Every creation is an outcome of this libidinal energy. But this libidinal energy has to be kept under control. This control is exercised by a phenomenon called censor. Censor. There is a kind, we know, we use this word very commonly. It is a very commonly used word. Censor is the controlling machinery. Now all these desires, all these volitions which are uncontrollable are controlled by the censor and not allowed to enter into the conscious mind. But there is a buffer in between. There is the unconscious mind and there is a conscious mind. There is a buffer in between which is subconscious mind. You can peep into the subconscious mind. You cannot totally understand subconscious mind. Unconscious mind is out of your reach. You cannot understand it at all. In subconscious mind, you can peep into it. Then it is a semi-dark portion of human mind. The conscious portion is illuminated. The subconscious portion is semi-illuminated, and the unconscious portion is totally dark. Now this is as I said, that this is a three-storied house, and the person who is governing it is the censor. The censor doesn't allow the desires and the volitions, the dark volitions to come to the conscious mind, because if they manage to come to the conscious mind, probably we will not be able to face them. Because now we have been told about the values, we have been told about the morals, we have been told about the ethics, and naturally we evaluate our own behavior applying all those values to our behavior. those desires may not subscribe to the values which have been fed to you. And that is why it will be very difficult for you to see those desires as your own desires, to see those feelings, to see those memories as your own memories. Now this becomes a very, very complex structure. I always get tempted to tell a story which I think can explain this situation very well. We do not know how far is it true, but it is believed that the Americans a few decades back had an obsession of keeping unusual pets. And one of the most popular pets in America in those days were baby crocodiles. They used to get very young crocodiles which are not larger than house lizard, and they used to keep it in the aquarium, but they obviously grow very fast, and as they grew larger it was not possible to keep them, so they used to drain them down to the toilets, and obviously when they were drained down, they did not die. It is said that all those crocodiles who were drained down the toilets, they lived in the drainage system of New York City. They grew over there, and there were thousands of crocodiles living under the ground of New York. Now try to imagine the beautiful city of New York on the surface, and under that city there were thousands and thousands of crocodiles moving around the drainage system of New York. The human mind is exactly like this. The beautiful human mind, where we talk about ethics, where we talk about friendship, where we talk about love, where we talk about sacrifice, all those things are like the beautiful city of New York, and the real desires are moving in the unconscious mind. We do not know what exactly is happening over there. So naturally, if thousands of desires are living there, it's not a very happy situation for them also. They want to come to the surface. They want to escape from that situation. The human desires also try to come to the surface. And suppose if they come to the surface, what will happen? If all those crocodiles come to the surface in New York City, similarly all those desires from the unconscious mind, if they come to the conscious mind, what will happen to the conscious mind? Now this is a very precarious situation. To gain control on this situation, the censor has been created. The censor doesn't allow them to come to the surface. He is a very strong person, but at the same time he knows that only suppression is not useful. They must get a breathing space, and that is why the censor sometimes allows these desires to come to the surface, but not in their real form. They are allowed to come to the surface in a camouflage. They are allowed to come to the surface under a garb of something else. So they take some different form. It is almost like theatre, that a villainish person appears in front of you in a very suave, sophisticated manner. Similarly, all these desires are presented in your conscious mind in a suave manner, in a camouflaged manner, in a hidden manner, and that appearance in the conscious mind, in the subconscious mind, is the dream. According to Freud, dream is a process of allowing these desires, these uncontrollable desires from that dark chamber to come to the conscious mind. And then they take some different form. All those desires which you are suppressing, they appear in your subconscious mind in some different form, move around over there, and like a prisoner who is allowed to go and meet his family for some time on a parole, these desires are allowed to come to the conscious mind on a parole. They move around there for some time and then again pushed back to their dark chamber. Now this is the process of the dream. The conscious mind, the censor trying to control these desires, allowing them to come to the Now see, it's a very interesting process. Now this dream is a matter of study for Freud. I'm sure many of you must have seen that famous book about the meaning of dreams. Rather, it is one of his most popular books, one of Freud's most popular books, where he is trying to explain the meaning of the dreams. But along with that, he has also tried to understand the structure of the dream and the mechanism of the dream. He says that the purpose of the dream is to protect the human sleep. Why should we allow these desires to come to the surface? Because if we want to retain the sanity of conscious mind, they will have to do that. And how the sanity of the conscious mind can be retained? How do you want to keep the mind healthy? You will have to have proper rest. You will have to have proper sleep. So one of the most important functions of dream is to protect your sleep. I'm sure many of you must have seen some very simple dreams. You are extremely tired, you are sleeping, and at night you start feeling thirsty. Actually, you are so tired that you do not want to get up from your bed and go to the kitchen. And at that juncture, you see a dream that you have actually gone to the kitchen and had water. After 2 hours, you realize that you didn't get up. Have you seen this dream? Or you want to go to the loo and you think that you have already gone there, but you don't go. Your mind creates a dream in which you do the thing which you wanted to do, but you do not actually do it. These smaller dreams, these simpler dreams are constructed to protect your sleep. Or you must have seen another dream, which is a very common dream among people, that on the day of the examination, you want to get up at 3:30. You want to be extremely responsible and work hard on the day of the examination, want to get up at 3:30, you put the alarm on, at 3:30 the alarm rings, you get up, sit at your table, work hard, and at 5:30 you realized that you are working in the dream, not in reality. Actually, you switched off the alarm and you dreamt that you are up, you are working, and at 5:30 you realize that it was just a dream. Now, this dream again was created to protect your sleep, but these are very simple dreams. Freud talks about much complex dreams which are created for the same purpose, but the purpose is not that simple. Here the purpose is very simple, to protect the dream, to protect the sleep, but otherwise the dream also protects the sanity of mankind. And how does that do it? He says that there are 4 stages in the mechanism of a dream. The dream is fabricated using 4 different devices. And the most important device of this fabrication, it's a very skillful fabrication. The human mind fabricates the dream so skillfully that many a times it's very interesting. Freud believes that sometimes you feel that you were dreaming for the whole night. You tell your friend that I could not sleep a second. I was dreaming the whole night and I was having such bad dreams for hours. Actually, the dreams are not seen for hours. Rather, the dream is not seen at all. How can you see something when your eyes are closed? We saw a dream, but we don't see a dream. We experience it. And this experience is, perhaps you people can understand it better, your generation can understand it better, because when you transfer data from the computer to a pen drive, now a long data, say a 25 pages data, it takes perhaps a couple of seconds to transfer that data. The computer does not actually read that data and transfers it. And the pen drive also does not read the data and transfer it. It is just transferred over there. Similarly, a dream is created and fed to your mind. Your mind sees the dream for a fraction of a second or perhaps a few seconds, and you think, but since the data which has been transferred is of 3.5 hours length. Do you get my point? The data which has been transferred apparently is of the length of 3.5 hours. So you think that you saw the dream for 3.5 hours. Actually, it took half a second. It took 2 seconds. It's very interesting. It's amazing. What he writes about dreams is very, very interesting. So this dream is fabricated and then fed to your mind, where you experience it, do not see it. And in this fabrication, what exactly takes place? There are 4 important things which the dream has to take care of when the dream is being formed. 1, your sleep must not be disturbed. 2, you should not get a shock, otherwise you will get up and naturally your sleep will get disturbed. So the characters of the dream will have to be camouflaged, as we discussed earlier. So what are the possible devices, what are the possible tools that are used by the dream to camouflage these characters or these desires? The most important of them is dream symbolization. Dream symbolization. The characters are symbolic, and then Freud gives us a long list of different kinds of symbols which are used in dreams. Like if you see king and queen in your dream, actually they represent your mother and father. To put it in simple terms, if you see the king dying in your dream, actually it is your fear about your father's death. So king and queen represent father and mother. The voyage represents death. Any protruding object represents male genital organ. And any concave object represents the female genital organ. So if you see the lock and the key in your dream, it might represent a sexual, it might express your sexual desire. So do you get my point? So this kind of symbolization has been discussed by Freud. One of his younger contemporaries and also a defender of his theory is Carl Jung. Carl Jung suggested a small amendment to this particular thought. He said that dream symbolization is an acceptable phenomenon, but these symbols are culture specific. What Freud is trying to suggest, that mother and father stands for this stands for this. He said that in all cultures it may not be true. Voyage in Europe may stand for death, but in India it may not. In India we will have to find a different symbol, because culture plays a very important role in symbolization. This culture specificity comes from a notion called collective subconscious. We borrow our subconscious. As I told you that there is a conscious mind, there is subconscious mind, and there is the unconscious mind. Unconscious mind governed by the id, subconscious mind governed by the superego, and the conscious mind being governed by the ego. Now, this subconscious is inherited. All our habits, there are some family traits. Some people in a particular family behave in a particular manner. If you know that family very well, you can immediately identify that he must be from that clan. Or why family? You must have observed that there are some community traits also. Some communities behave in a particular manner. Now, in 21st century, people may not appreciate this kind of analysis, but still I think there is a grain of truth in it. There are some community traits, there are some national traits. हम हमेशा कहते हैं कि हम इंडियन कभी नहीं सुधरेंगे. Will behave in a particular manner. All Indians behave in a particular manner. All North Indians behave in a particular. The South Indians keep talking about the northern practices, and the northern people keep talking about the southern practices. Why does it happen? This is cultural inheritance. Our subconscious is inherited through generations, and that is why, and that precisely is culture. So symbolism is culture specific. So Carl Jung subscribes to the notion of dream symbolization, but he thinks that this symbolization is culture specific. So this is dream symbolization, that is first major tool in the fabrication of dream. The second tool is dream displacement. So the displacement of the nucleus. Actually, I am not necessarily following any sequence, because he also discuss it in a sequence. In displacement, the central figure or the central character or the central locale will be shifted to the periphery, and a very minor character will brought into the center. Because if you see a particular person in your dream, suppose you are worried about a very close friend of yours, or you are worried about your sister, and if you see that sister in your dream, now obviously that worry will get multiplied and the purpose of the dream will be defeated. So even if it is a dream pertaining to the health of a particular person who is dear to you, you will not see that person in your dream. That person will be in the periphery and some other person will come in the center. I always say that a waiter in your college canteen might appear in your dream. Have you noticed it? That some very insignificant people who do not play any major role in your life are seen in your dreams. The characters whom you do not, in the daytime you may not even bother to have a look of that person, but such people keep appearing in your dream because the dream wants to shift your attention from the main character of the dream. This is displacement. The main locale, the main character is displaced and other character is brought into the center. The actual character, the protagonist of the dream, is pushed into the periphery. This is displacement. Then The third one is very interesting, dream condensation. Dream condensation. Now imagine, right from the age when you were a child, you have been pushing these desires into that netherworld, into that dark corner. How many of them are waiting to be on the parole? They want to be relieved on the parole, and there are thousands and thousands of them standing in a queue. If they allow one desire at a time to come to the surface, probably there will be so many desires who will never get a chance to come to the surface. So there, so many of them are allowed to come to the surface in a group. But then they behave like a group, they merge like a group, and it almost becomes a homogeneous character. Have you ever noticed that in your dream, you talk to your mother and step out of your house and start walking on the streets of Delhi? Or sometimes you meet a friend whose voice is like your father. Have you noticed this? Like there are several characters. The characters keep switching so fast in your dream. You are talking to your mother in Baroda, and then you turn back and you are in Mahabalipuram. And then you turn back and you are in Delhi. So the places, the characters, the voices, all these things keep shifting so fast. This is called dream condensation. Allowing so many characters, so many desires. So they are sent in a group, and that is why all those characters, they keep showing their characteristics in your dream. This particular phenomenon is called dream condensation. And then the fourth thing is very important, because all these things, all this potpourri will have to be made convincing. When you look at the dream, if the dream is not properly edited, secondary elaboration is, to put it in modern terminology, it is editing the dream. So all this masala of the condensed characters, of the displaced characters, of the symbolized characters, it is put together and they are very skillfully edited to make it convincing. Otherwise, the purpose of the dream will be defeated. To make it convincing, sometimes because the censor is a character which does not go out to sleep thoroughly. Like the human brain, even while sleeping, the human brain is not totally unconscious. Right? Even if you are sleeping, if there is some sound, you get up. Or if somebody calls for you, you immediately respond to it. So the human brain is partially conscious even at that time. Similarly, the censor is also partially conscious. Now all these characters come to the surface by cheating censor. Censor is dozing over there, and then these characters are sneaking out and entering into the conscious mind. But if the censor comes to know about the reality of these characters, he will immediately catch hold of them and push them back in the unconscious mind. Right? To prevent that, this editing is very, very important. In this editing, many a times some external experiences are also incorporated. Like if you are sleeping and if the doorbell is ringing, in your dream, you will feel that some telephone is ringing, and you will go and in your dream you will perhaps respond to the telephone. And then after some time you will realize that in the dream what you felt as a telephone ring is not a telephone ring, it is a doorbell. And then you will go get up and go. Have you experienced this? That the outer experiences, the outer sounds are also incorporated into the dreams. Now you must be wondering that what exactly this dream has to do with aesthetics. Freud has given a very interesting parallel of this dream to the process of creation. In one of his essays, which is a very interesting essay, Artist as a Daydreamer. Now you must be wondering what these dreams have to do with aesthetics. But Freud has associated these dreams with a very interesting aesthetic theory. In one of his essays, which is titled as Artist as a Daydreamer, he tries to give us a parallel between the construction of the actual dream and the creation of a work of art. And he calls it a daydreamer. Now, what exactly is the difference between the actual dream and the daydream? The actual dream is unintentional. At least we think it is unintentional, we do not know. According to Freud, there is an intention behind everything. If you go to your friend's place and leave your keys back, or forget your keys, there could be an intention behind it that probably you want to visit that place once again. He says that there is an intentionality in everything, we do not understand it. But let's keep it aside for a while. The night dream is not controlled by an individual, it takes its own shape. The mind weaves it, but we do not know what exactly goes into it. But in the daydreaming, we have some control. But otherwise, there is not much of a difference between the actual dream and the daydream. This daydream, what do you do? At this moment also, when I am talking to you, it is quite possible that you people are daydreaming. While daydreaming, you don't have to get actually physically involved in it. There is a difference between the daydream of a child and the daydream of an adult. The children, their play is also kind of daydreaming. When they play teacher, it is a daydreaming, because finally what Freud says that there are two very strong feelings in human mind. One is eros and the other is thanatos. Eros is the feeling of love, the feeling of pleasure, the feeling, and thanatos is the feeling of death, the desire of death. So on one hand, we keep desiring for the best things in life. We keep desiring for the eros, that is for sex, that is for sexual pleasure, erotic pleasure, the material pleasure. On the other hand, we also keep desiring for the death. All the adventure games could be a manifestation of thanatos. The thanatos also governs our mind to some extent. So even our daydreams are always controlled by the eros and the thanatos. When the child is playing teacher, every child wants to be a teacher. Nobody wants to be a pupil. Why? Because there is a feeling of power in it. The teacher is a powerful person, and that is why every child wants that power. He wants to be the teacher. When you are playing Chor Sipahi, at that time, very interestingly, in Chor Sipahi, every child wants to be a chor, not Sipahi. That could be an expression of thanatos. Do you get my point? So there are some very interesting governing elements in daydreaming also. So, but the child wants some external stimuli for daydreaming. Like if they are playing teacher's game, then if not blackboard, at least the wall. If not a chalk, at least a piece of stick. The child wants something and it leads to actual action. The child will actually stand in front of the rest of the children and behave like a teacher. But when you are daydreaming, you are not getting involved in any of the actions. At this moment, you might be dreaming of something, but you can sit quietly and keep dreaming in your mind. But again, in that dream also, the eros and the thanatos play a crucial role. If a person is expecting a good job and he is sitting in the queue of an interview, this is the example given by Freud, that he is waiting in the queue for an interview. So what exactly would be he dreaming? He will go in, the boss will get damn impressed by his performance, and though the post is for the clerk, he would offer him a post of a manager. So once he becomes a manager, in 6 months' time, with his performance, he is made into a chief manager, and the boss offers his daughter to him, something like that. There is always an element of pleasure in it. And in this process, the logic is also very important. In daydreaming, suppose if you are dreaming of getting a lottery, you will immediately think about the income tax also. While daydreaming, you will not take away all the money, take home all the money which you get from the lottery. You will think about the income tax, कि इसमें income tax कितना लगने वाला है. 10 करोड़ की lottery लगी, but perhaps I'll be able to take home 7.5 crores. This logic governs your daydreaming. So intention governs your daydreaming, logic governs your daydreaming, which normally is not seen in the actual dreaming. And that is why the creation of art is closer to daydreaming, because there are some external controls, there is some intentionality in the creation of art. Now, let's talk about a work of art. For example, we will take up a play. When I write a play, what exactly do I do? When I find the characters, do you think that those 5 characters come from nowhere? The 5 characters which I am using in my play, they do not come from the blues. They come from the people whom I have seen. Every work of art no work of art can be totally imaginary. There is a grain of truth in every work of art. And we borrow from the reality. But we do not directly borrow from the reality. We borrow from, to create a particular character. I don't know whether you people have seen the animations, the Walt Disney animations. Now, when animation like in Lion King, they invited so many important actors to lend their voice to these characters. Why? Because that particular voice had a particular feeling. So the character looked like something, appeared like somebody else, spoke like the third person, they walked like the fourth person. Do you get my point? So every character in a play is an amalgam of several characters which I actually see in the real life. So this is dream condensation, isn't it? Like dream condensation, I am condensing my characters. I do not want to reveal that from where exactly have I brought these characters. And that is why I conceal them, I cover them so skillfully that the original source of that character is always hidden. That is dream displacement. I displace my characters, displace the different events from my play. Though I borrow it from particular source, if people come to know about it, if it is a biopic, then it's a different thing. But if I am writing a fiction, then I will have to take due care not to reveal the source of my information. Otherwise, people will sue me. So I displace my work of art, I condense my work of art, I edit my work of art, I symbolize my work of art, because in a work of art, we always use metaphors, we always use symbols. So all those four tools which have been used by the dream, which have been used by the human mind to create a dream, I exactly use the same tools to create a work of art. So in a way, an artist is a daydreamer. An artist is a dreamer who uses the same technology to create a work of art. And that is why, by using the same theory of subconscious mind, it is possible to trace back the creative process of an artist. That is what Freud is trying to tell us. That this fabrication of dream, this notion of dream, the creation of dream will help us to understand the creative process of an individual. He has tried to do it using some very interesting examples, mainly by artists like Michelangelo and Leonardo. But we will talk about it in the next session.